Good afternoon, our dear students, our postgraduate students, our master students, our advanced students. Let's get to the second lecture in the series for MSM 841. This afternoon, we want to discuss on a topic: critical assessment of environmental standards. Critical assessment of environmental standards. That's going to be my second lecture for my part of the course. All right, we are going to discuss based on the flowing outline. You might not see any other slide. So we are going to discuss, okay? We are going to discuss based on the following outline. Definitions, types of environmental standards, environmental compliance, environmental safety standard, and biosafety and biosecurity. Then target of environmental standards. Then some critical evaluation. Sorry, that's evaluation. EVA, sorry. Critical evaluation. Okay, so let's get to the first one. Definition. The topic is environmental standards. First of all, what are standards? Standards are policy instruments. Standards are policy instruments. So, a standard is a value fixed by authorities. Okay, is a value fixed by authorities, and as a result of that, it is always enshrined in a legal regulation and therefore has legal force. So it's authority that actually fix standards. You as a student, you cannot fix standards. Maybe society like maybe the chemical society, they can fix standards. But in all, it's authority that actually fix standards, and it will always have a legal backing. So although a standard is based upon a guideline, it also takes into account technical, economical, social, cultural, or political aspects, So you don't just fix a standard, you just have to take into consideration some technical aspect of it, some economic aspect of it, social, how does it affect human beings, cultural, okay, cultural, religious, political, undertones. You have to consider it. The feasibility is the most important criterion in this respect. So if you want to fix a standard, you check this standard I want to fix, is it actually feasible? For example, if you want to say, okay, everybody will drink only 1 cup of water a day, or let's just put it this way, you put a standard and say everybody must drink 10 liters of water every day. Now you look at it, is it feasible? Is it possible? What are the technical implications? What are the economic implications? What are the social, cultural, political implications? So you have to actually consider all these things before you fix a standard. All right, so an environmental standard, we are just talked about a standard. An environmental standard is a policy guideline, okay, that regulates the effect of human activity upon an environment. Okay, so you have a standard, but now you are now narrowing down to environmental standard, and we say it's a policy guideline that regulates the effect of human activity upon the environment. Okay, so you can see that a set of quality conditions that are adhered to or maintained for a particular environmental component and function. All right, so how do we relate with this? A set of quality conditions that must be adhered to or maintained for a particular environmental component and function. All right. So these are some of the definitions we need to take. Then we also might need to define or discuss or describe what we mean by environmental quality standard. Remember, we defined under definition, we have defined what is a standard. We define what is environmental standard. Then what then environmental quality standard. An environmental quality standard is a value generally defined by regulation which specifies the maximum permissible concentration of potentially hazardous chemical in an environmental sample, either in the air or in water. This is described as environmental quality standard, EQS, environmental quality standard. So in the marine environment, the EQS for marine freshwater and sediment, okay, have been developed, and although there are no global value, as many countries have their own standards, okay, different countries have their different EQS. All right, so let's get to types of standard. Types of standard. What are the types of standard? We want to discuss majorly on maybe just three types of standard. The first one is the ambient standard. Please take note, ambient standards. Ambient is spelled AMBIENT, ambient standards. So what are ambient standards? Okay, they refer to the constraint level of pollution that is allowed to have, or the constraint level of pollutant that is allowed to have in ambient environment. The level of pollutant that is allowed in an ambient environment. Okay. Now, these standards set maximum allowable level of a pollutant in the receiving medium. So, ambient standards is talking about the permissible, the allowable level of pollutants in any medium, whether the air, water, or soil. That is the ambient standards. Then we also have the second one, the emission standard. Emission standards are the legal requirements governing air pollutants released into the atmosphere. Now, when we talk of emission is always in the air component of the environment. The environment can be hydrosphere, the atmosphere, or the lithosphere. Now, when we're talking of emission has to do with the gaseous state. So, emission standards are the legal requirement governing an air pollutant or governing air pollutant released into the atmosphere. Okay. It said the quantitative limits on the permissible amount of specific air pollutants that can be released from specific sources over specific time frame. So when we talk of the emission standards, they are narrowed down to, or they are specifically for air pollutants. Okay. While ambient standards has to do with the entire environment, whether it's air, water, or the soil. All right. So the third one is the technology standards. Technology standard, just as the name implies, is specify the requirement of technologies that polluters must adopt. Okay. Just recently, we had is it the road safety or which agency that said that they are going to impound rickety vehicles on the road. Okay. Now, they are telling us that these rickety vehicles cause road accidents and all the rest. Okay, but when you're talking about technology standard, you're talking about the technology that is used in the manufacturing. Okay, because if you have a rickety vehicle, for example, you are likely to have more emissions of carbon monoxide, more than you have in that can be discharged or can be released with new and good vehicles. So technology standards specify the requirement of technologies that polluters must adopt. So it's technology based. Okay. Okay, they are technology based and they are based on the knowledge of what can be achieved with current equipment and practices. So it is just it has to do with the technology, or this technology emits higher amount of pollutants. Therefore, don't use this. Use this new technology. Use this advanced technology. And that is exactly what technology standard is all about. All right. So we have what we call the BAT, best available technology. So this standard we always opt for or insist on best available technology. Okay. Or the BPT, which is the best practicable technology. Best practicable technology. Okay. Uh, so the emphasis here is actually on the technology. So the types of environmental standards we have discussed, or we have mentioned three of them in particular. We've mentioned the ambient standards, the emission standards, and the technology standard. Please try and know the difference between the three and try and get more information on each of them. So let's get to the next outline. The next outline is environmental compliance. What do we mean by environmental compliance? From the word compliance, it means to conform, okay, to abide by. So environmental compliance means conforming to environmental laws, regulations, standards, and other requirements such as site permits to operate. Okay, just comply by them. Comply by the conform by what is being stated. Conform or comply by the laws, the regulations, the standards, and other requirements like permits to operate, site permit to operate, or you say if you want to get to a construction site, wear a helmet, to cover your head, your skull, wear a boot, cover your hand, and also these are what we call the site permits. Okay, so when you comply with them, that's what we mean by environmental compliance. Now, in order to comply with the above requirements and an obligation, certain conditions within them must be met. Typically, these will include: number one, managing monitoring programs or schedules, ensuring that the monitoring requires in the permit have been done. So, of course, if you want people to comply, you must have to monitor. If you don't monitor, people will not. That's why you have enforcement. Okay. All right. Then you have to pre-process. Performing calculation and validation, and validating the data for compliance with any alert or reporting level. So, you need to put in place some measures, to form of create an alert that somebody is not actually complying. Now there are some industry, there are some firms, some industry, some construction industry that it has been so programmed that maybe, let's say, you are supposed to enter there with your head covered, or with your hand covered, and you didn't do that. Something will be triggered off, the form of an alarm to show that you have not actually complied. This is actually in a way of helping people to abide by. Okay, So there's also generating routine compliance report for authorities. Okay, so you need to get a report, stating how much compliance, the workers have been able to adopt. All right, so the next one we want to discuss on the outline is environmental safety standards. Environmental safety standard. Under environmental safety standard, we have biosafety. What is biosafety? It's the prevention of large-scale loss of biological integrity, focusing both on ecology and human health. Now, when we talk of biosafety, we are talking of the biological safety. We are talking about the biological integrity, and we are trying to conserve. We are trying to preserve. We are trying to maintain the integrity of the ecology, the ecosystem, and then we are also trying to maintain the integrity of human health. So biosafety. Okay, these prevention mechanisms include conduction of regular reviews of biosafety in laboratory settings. Okay, so in the lab you are what they call biosafety. Okay, so that you prevent some accidents. You stop and you prevent, you forestall some harmful incidents. Okay, the laboratory handling of biohazards. That's why sometimes if you get to a lab, they label, they use something to indicate danger, to label acids, something like a skull with bone, to say this is dangerous or this is a hazard. Okay, and okay, also when maybe a road is slippery or the road is slopey or a road is meandering, or some toxic or waste are stored in a particular place, you put a sign, okay, that this place is not safe, this place is not safe for human beings. All right, now the typical example is what happened in Lebanon recently, where they stored some harmful uh, harmful material that eventually caught fire and caused a lot of some explosive material that caused large scale explosion. Maybe there were no signs, for people to avoid such areas or for people to be careful about, getting to such areas. Uh, those things are known as biosafety. Biosafety involves the application of knowledge, technologies, and equipment to prevent personal, laboratory, and environmental exposure to potentially infectious agents or biohazards. Now, it is not only like acid, but also some agents, some biohazards, some viral that are being, maybe some viral that are being studied, some pathogens that are being studied. They can cause biohazard if they get exposed or if they get released to the environment. Okay, so acts of making sure that this is prevented, this is forestalled, is known as biosafety. All right, you can also get more information on biosafety. The next one is biosecurity. Biosecurity refers to measures that are taken to stop the spread or introduction of harmful organisms to humans, okay, animals and plants. Uh, uh, like what happened at Wuhan. I don't know, maybe it's a conspiracy theory, but that people were actually working on some hazardous pathogens, and then it got released to humanity, to animals, and then and causing the COVID-19 pandemic. So, biosecurity has to do with measures that is taken to stop the spread, okay, to stop the spread. Now, even as it is now, many of us are wearing masks now when we move about. Is still a way of biosecurity. Those are non-pharmaceutical thing that you need to do, washing of hands or physical distancing, using your, sneezing into your elbow, and all the rest. Those are measures, to forestall the spread of or introduction of harmful organisms, and in this case now the COVID-19. Now the measures taken are a combination of processes and systems that have been put in place for bioscience laboratory. Okay, the custom agents can also be there. How the quarantine. Quarantine is a very good way of is a very good form of biosecurity. Or if you are traveling, you need a yellow fever vaccine. You know, is also is a form of biosecurity, so that you don't move. I remember the time of Ebola. Sometimes before you enter any country, they might need to test you whether you are bringing Ebola to their country. Now we have COVID-19. If you are moving to another country, you have to get the certificate for vaccine. This is a measure that is known as biosecurity. Now, some of these things are things we know, but we just have to link it to a particular terminology. All right. So, what are the targets of environmental? What are the targets of environmental standards? What are the targets of environmental standards? Now, you don't just bring up environmental standards; they are targeted to something. Okay, because we know that environmental standard companies can have at least two different targets. Okay, no, the target one, okay, at least three different targets. Target one is aimed at avoiding negative health consequences of exposure to pollutants. Okay, so when you get standards, when you get environmental standards, you are aiming at making sure that uh, the negative health consequences of pollution of exposure to pollution is avoided. Okay, the standard should apply in near ground level outdoor location where a person might reasonably be expected to be exposed over a relevant average period. Okay, so we put all these standards so that, especially the emission standard, you know, because when you release it into the environment, you can't control where they go. And so these standards are there to make sure that the negative health consequences of exposure to pollution is actually avoided. Now, another target of our environmental standard uh, is to protect human health. Is to make sure that human beings are protected from health hazard. Not only human beings, but also the environment. Okay, the environment is also protected from hazard, from pollution, because if the environment is polluted, if this negative emission, if these harmful or substances or pollutants are released into the environment, uh, all the components, all the biotic components of the environment will be affected. So it's not only human being, it's also for the environment. Now, another one is also to support sustainable development. Why also do we get environmental standard? Is to actually support sustainable development. Okay, which is a more recent target for environmental standard. This is a more recent target. No, first and foremost, it was just for health issues. Okay, it's just to forestall, to prevent health hazards. Then it's now developed to not just human beings, not just the health of human beings, but the health of the environment, the animals in the environment, the trees in the environment, the organisms in the environment, apart from human beings, should also be protected, and therefore we have this standard. Then we also have the issue of supporting sustainable development. Okay, now by avoiding adverse health impact from high pollution level. Okay, so protecting the environment and contributing to sustainable development are the more targets of environmental standards. So you prevent health hazards. Okay, you stop the environment from being destroyed, and then you support sustainable development. These are the three major targets of environmental standards. So let's quickly get some critical evaluation. Let's just look at it holistically. Now, these standards we are talking about, remember we say that before you put up a standard, and that is why most standards are not global. Most environmental standards are not global. Before you put up an environmental standard, you check the feasibility of it. Okay. You check the cultural aspect of it. You check the religious aspect of it, the political undertone of it. Okay. Many areas before you now bring up in that standard. But despite the commendable support which safe minimum standards appear to give for nature conservation, please listen to this. They involve conceptual problems, okay, and uncertainties as outlined as we have done discussed. There are still some conceptual problems and uncertainty. For example, or in fact, safe minimum standard for conservation of species do not exist. Now, what does that mean? No matter what you do, it is not possible that species will be conserved and then maintained uh, at the pristine state. There must still be pollution, or species will still be affected. No standard ensure the continued existence of any species, even human beings. Even human beings. Now, see what is happening in the UK, for example, and in the US. The US has gotten up to 500,000 deaths from COVID-19. Okay. Yet they practice good hygiene. Okay. They have good standards, they have good hospitals. Even we in Nigeria that don't have these things are not even being killed as they are being killed. So there are no standards. There are no standards that ensure the continued existence of any species. Okay, this is not to deny that an improvement in standard can, up to a point, increase the probability of survival of a species for a specified period of time. But it implies that minimum standard need to be cast in terms of those required to achieve a particular probability of survival of the targeted species for a specified period. Now, so good environmental standards are good. In fact, they help to maintain, survival of species, survival of even human beings, because we are also a species of animal anyway. Now, but there's no particular standards. After all, we have natural disasters. There are no particular standard that will ensure the continued existence of any particular species. All right. But what we have discussed now is very important, and in the next class, we are going to go deeper into trying to domesticate what we are talking about, especially in terms of standards, and maintaining our environment. So we are going to be talking about industrial and institutional and regulatory framework for environmental protection in Nigeria, because we also have standards. We are also going to see this standard we have, how well have they worked? How well have they worked? For example, we have the National Environmental Standards and Regulation Enforcement Agency, that's the NESRA. We have the NESRA, we have the NOSRA, we have the DPR, we have LASEPA, we have a whole lot of them. How well have waste fared? you know. And we are also signatory to a lot of treaties, conventions that are meant to preserve our environment. How well have we done in all these things? All right, so this is where we are going to end this lecture, and then uh, we discuss further on next topics when we meet next time. Thank you so much, and God bless you.